Hello everybody and a very warm welcome back to my latest video. I do hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. In today's video I want to feature an obscure record label, a record label I totally adore and I love many of their releases. And it's the Marble record label. Marble Records was the brainchild of Johnny Brantley, and he was born in Vidalia, Georgia in 1929 and spent his early years in Savannah. After serving in the US Air Force during the Korean War, he settled in New York City in 1953. His first job in the music industry came through Alan Freed. Alan Freed was a legendary radio DJ, and he's credited for popularizing the term rock and roll. Brantley worked at WINS Radio, intentionally managing the station's record library before being promoted to talent coordinator for Freed.
Okay, here's that great blues boy, B.B. King's latest RPM record, Lonely and Blue.
By 1956, Brantley began writing songs and producing records, and he became a key figure in New York's vibrant R&B and soul scene. He worked with numerous labels and producers and learning the ropes of the music business while building a reputation as a mover and shaker. However, his career was marked by frequent job changes and partnerships that often ended abruptly. Brantley eventually struck out on his own, founding Bozart Music, a publishing company, and taking on roles such as promotions manager, producer, and DJ. He kind of did it all. By the early 1960s, he was deeply implemented in the music industry, and he collaborated with figures like George Goldner, Morris Levy, on whom I did a video a couple of weeks ago in Germany, and Bobby Robinson. These people have quite an interesting reputation in the music industry, and it wasn't all for the benefit of the artist, it was most of the time the benefit for their own pocket. But Brantley's knack for spotting talent and his relentlessly drive to push his artists forward earned him both admirers and critics. Brantley's approach to production was resourceful and very interesting. He was known for his ability to extract maximum value from his recordings, often reusing instrumental tracks and layering new vocals to create new songs. While this method allowed him to produce a large volume of material quickly, it also drew accusations of cutting corners and exploiting his artists. One of Brantley's most notable early achievements, if you want to call it that way, was his work with Jimi Hendrix, who before his rise to fame served as a session guitarist on recordings for artists such as The Iceman, Jimmy Norman, and Billy Lamont. Brantley's association with Hendrix would later become a key point of contention, as he re-released these early recordings after Hendrix's death in 1970, and with questionable overdubs to emphasize Hendrix's contribution to these recordings. But we get to that point a little later. In 1970, Brantley founded Marble Records, a label intended to showcase his productions and provide a platform for many artists he managed or recorded. To distribute Marble's releases, Brantley partnered with Joe Robinson's All Platinum Records. All Platinum Records was a New Jersey-based label known for its success with Sylvia Robinson's productions. You may know her from A Rapper's Delight, but that's a totally different story. The partnership seemed promising at first. Brantley had a backlog of recordings ready for release, including material by the chosen few Lee Moses, Gloria Barnes, and of course others. And on the other hand, All Platinum, with its established distribution network, appeared well positioned to help Marple achieve commercial success. However, the relationship between Brantley and Robinson was fraught with tension. Both men were ambitious and driven, but their priorities often clashed. Robinson's focus on profit and Brantley's creative but also chaotic approach to production created a very interesting dynamic. Actually, the Hendrix recordings who were involved by Brantley were the reason that these two really got together, because at that time, when somebody like Hendrix died, you tried to cash in as fast as possible, and these recordings were a very easy way to do so. But let's get into the artists and the releases of Marble Records, and I promise you we get into the discussion about these Hendrix recordings a little later, because I could make a whole video about these recordings and what's behind these recordings and allegations behind those recordings, and it would take up a couple of hours. But Marble Records produced several albums and singles, many of which have since become rare and highly collectible. Some of the most significant releases I would like to introduce you to. And the first act to be released on Marble Records was The Chosen Few. The Chosen Few were a group which were led by Gerald Perry, Mark Williams and Roy Handy. And they emerged from the group The Adventurers, which was a group Brantley collaborated earlier in the 60s with. The group's debut album, Taking All the Love I Can, was once again a knack for recycling and reusing material for Brantley. Let's talk about some tracks on this album. We have Birth of a Playboy.
This is my song.
This was originally recorded by the Adventurers years earlier, and this track was updated for the album with slight modifications. And even for 1970s, this song sounds outdated. I Can Take No Chances is a standout on the album, and it showcases the potential of the group if they would have been given stronger material, but it's a great tune. Trespassing was written by Dutch Robinson of the Ohio Players. Yes, the Ohio Players. This track was another example of Brantley's recycling approach, because the original was an instrumental, and what did Brantley do? He put The Chosen Few in the studio and layered their vocals on top of the instrumental. Also reworked Adventurous materials were tracks like I Caught You Cheating and You Say You Love Me, which were re-recordings of songs that had been originally released by the Adventures. It's all in all a patchwork album, and if you have the opportunity to listen to the album, I think you will agree. The production, you actually hear that the material has been recorded on different times in different studios, and there was no approach being done in the engineer's side to try to make the whole album sound as it had been released in the same studio at the same time. That wasn't done at all. High hopes were made for promotion because there was the deal with All Platinum. But what happened was there was actually no promotion from All Platinum at all, and the album faded into obscurity. Today, it is a rare and collectible piece of music, of soul music to be more specific. It's not overall super expensive, but a couple of $100 or euros you need to spend to find a decent copy. Another release which has now a cult status is Lee Moses' Time and Place. Lee Moses is a Georgia-born singer and guitarist, and he had collaborations with Johnny Brantley since the mid-1960s. and he was known for his raw, emotionally charged voice. Moses was the perfect vehicle for Brantley's gritty, funky-infused production style, and his album Time and Place remains one of the crown jewels of Marple Records. And like I said in the beginning, it's a cult classic nowadays. Some songs to point out from that album is Time and Place. That's the album's title track, and it was the lead single for that album. It's a powerful statement of blending funk rhythms with Moses' vocals. It's an absolutely masterpiece. My personal highlight from the album is the song Got That Will. It's an absolutely high energy, funky track, and it briefly made it on New York's WWRL radio charts and had quite the potential.
Got that will to learn.
Hey Joe was inspired by the version from Jimi Hendrix, and he totally makes it his own, an absolute highlight. Adorable One is a reworked version from Moses' earlier singles, and once again, it's an absolutely killer track. Another song I want to point out, another standout song, standout ballad, is Free at Last.
Now we can go to places we never went before.
The album also included covers of California Dreaming and other standards, which Moses made him his own with his unique vocal style. Unfortunately, like many Marple releases, Time and Place suffered from no promotion at all and absolutely poor distribution. This album is considered a masterpiece of deep soul and funk, with original pressings, if you find them, are in the 4 digits. You can find the original versions, I've seen them a couple of times, but like I said, in the 4 digits. I think this one is the most expensive one, at least when it comes to soul on Marple Records, and this is Gloria Barnes' Uptown. Gloria Barnes is a singer with a powerful and very emotional voice, and was a key artist on Marple Records. Her album Uptown is now regarded as a masterpiece. And, well, what happened during its release? It went absolutely nowhere. Songs I want to point out on this album is You Don't Mean It, which is nowadays a Northern Soul favorite. Old Before My Time is a standout ballad once again, and absolutely filled with deep emotion. Find Someone to Love is another soulful song, and I highly suggest that you check that out. And if you like it a little more funky, a little more mid-tempo, check out I'll Call You Back Later.
I changed my mind.
So Brantley employed multiple backing bands for the album, including Lee Moses Disciplines, the Ohio Players, and the Hustlers. And the result was an absolutely great collection of songs that reflected Barnes' talent. But like Moses' Time and Place, Uptown was poorly marketed or absolutely not marketed at all. And there was no distribution, therefore it had no success, and today it's considered one of the finest soul albums of its area. If you want to have an original copy of this one, I have seen original copies being sold for around $3,000 or euros. Yes, you've heard that right. Another album I want to point out on Marple Records is not soul. It's an experimental rock meets soul album, and it was one of Marple's more unusual projects. It was the album The Rise of Flood by the Fiberglass Vegetables. And it was a New York-based rock group later rebranded as Flood. The band blended psychedelic rock with elements of soul and funk and creating a unique sound that set them apart from Maple's other acts. While the album showed promise, you guessed it right, it was actually not being promoted at all. So therefore you can imagine that it's been hardly found today. Also, what happened to that album was that it was poorly recorded and required a lot of work from the engineers at All Platinum to make it sound acceptable. Let's get back to the Jimi Hendrix controversy. And it's also one of the most controversial episodes in Brantley's career. The way he handled the recordings featuring Jimi Hendrix, the way he handled the people who were involved in the recording of these tracks. So what happened was that after Jimi Hendrix's death, Brantley repackages these early sessions recordings as a Maple album and titled it Two Great Experiences Together. And he credited it to Jimi Hendrix and Lonnie Youngblood. The album included overdubs to make Hendrix's contributions more prominent, but later on leading to dispute over the authenticity of the recordings. But what about Lonnie Youngblood? Well, Lonnie Youngblood accused Brantley and Robinson of stealing his master tapes and altering the tracks without his permission. The controversy surrounding these recordings put a bad light on Brantley's reputations, though the album sold moderately well and remains a curiosity for Hendrix fans. Lonnie later claimed that Brantley, who had access to all the studios and was a well-known figure, could have easily gone to his studio and take out the master tapes. He also claims that Brantley bribed the studio owner in giving him access to the tapes. Lonnie always kept his master tapes in the studio he was recording because he was touring a lot, he was not often at home, so for him it was the best way his tapes would be kept. And this was the result of it. By mid-1971, Maple Records was struggling. You can imagine why. All Platinum's distribution and promotion efforts were, well, let's say it, inadequate, were not there at all. And the label's releases failed to gain traction. Yeah, if you don't promote an album and actually do nothing, this is the result of it. So they tried a second wave of releases in 1971, including Gloria Barnes, which we talked about, and another album which I also very, very much like is Mabuse Madness. And you can imagine what happened. Yes, absolutely nothing. And by 1972, Brantley was so frustrated that he returned back to Georgia and he launched the short-lived Gates production label. In his later years, Brantley continued to work in the music industry, producing records for artists like Lionel Hampton, and had collaborations with the likes of Rick Willard on songwriting projects. However, his output never matched the intensity of his work during the late 60s and early 70s. Brantley passed away in Teaneck, New Jersey in 1985. Despite the controversies and the commercial failures that marked his career, Johnny Brantley's contribution to music remains significant. His work with artists like Lee Moses, Gloria Barnes, and The Chosen Few gained newfound appreciation among collectors and music lovers. Marble Records, though short-lived, stands as a testament to Brantley's creativity and ambition. But, and that's very important for me to point out, it also showcases the dark side of the music business. Ripping off artists, if the accusations are correct, stealing master tapes, altering these master tapes, ruin the original artist's intention of how the records should sound, and also ruin careers before they even started. But I also have to admit that the lack of promotion and care from All Platinum wasn't Brantley's fault. I think he had the best intention, of course financially, for Marple to become an established label. If the story would have been different with the likes of Lee Moses or Gloria Barnes, if they would have met somebody else, we will never know this. But thankfully, decades later, those albums are very much cherished and reissued.
Guitar, he made it. Yes, he did. But me got that wheel.
If you want to find more information about the All Platinum label and all of this, what happened there, I can absolutely suggest that you check out the book The Making of Sound by Steve Guaroni. It's an absolutely astonishing book and a kind of Bible surrounding everything with All Platinum. If you like that video, I also highly recommend that you check out the playlist appearing here, and I catch you on the next one.